I think we got up to the on 67B3 at the last paragraph. But I'm not positive we did that, the top of the second column. So we were talking about what happens if someone needs tzedakah but refuses to accept tzedakah. So or 67B3. Yeah. What? We're in Kesuvos. Kesuvos number 2. If you took the little one, you don't have the right one because I have the little one. If you need the big one, it's up here.
Oh, yeah.
By the way, next time let's do the small ones. They're easier to pick up. Fine, if they're easier to pick up. But I saw our eyes over here. Well, I can't see anyways. Okay. That's why I got the bigger ones the second time. But if you want to go back to the small ones, I'll get the small ones. So we were talking about if someone needs tzedakah but refuses to take tzedakah, I mean to machlokas, but we say you tell them, okay, I'm loaning you the money, and then you never collect it. And if someone has money but refuses to spend money on themselves and wants to be taken for tzedakah, you can give it to him and then collect. The Gemara says, but how do you collect? He says he's not going to pay, so you collect it from his estate after he dies. So in this top of the second column on 67B3 says Tana Rabbanan, a brisa Haveit. So these are so Haveit Havitanu. The whole pasuk in Parshas Re'eh says, "Ki pasachti tachas edchalo," you shall surely open your hand to him. V'haveit havitanu. Art Scroll translates the word haveit as lend. You shall surely lend him de machzoro, everything he's lacking. Ashir yachzar lo, or de machzoro, up to what he's lacking. Ashir yachzar lo, that he is lacking. It's a very strange pasuk because we have double verbs twice. Pasach tiftach haveit havitanu, and then de machzor asher yachzar lo, that he's lacking. It's not a verb, but there's a lot of double lashonos going in the pasuk. So the Brisa is darshing haveit, lend him. This is someone who doesn't have, but he doesn't want to receive tzedakah, so lend him. That you tell him that it's for a loan, but really you give it to him as a gift. Tavitanu, you shall surely loan him. This is someone who has, but he refuses to spend money on himself. He wants the community to support him. You give it to him as a gift, and then after he dies, you collect it from the estate. Diva Rabbi Yehuda, this is Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. But the Chachamim say Yesh Lava Eina Rotzali Sparnes. If he has and he doesn't want to support himself, you don't have to, you just let him be. You don't have to pretend and give him money. So why does the pasuk say Havei Tavitanu? The Torah speaks the way people speak, and it gives the double verb not to make a drasha from it, just the way people speak. It's not talking about two different cases. Mar Ukva Havi Anya B'Shivuse. Mar Ukva had a certain person in his neighborhood to have a ragel koyama deshadi le arba zuzi b'tzinora deshada. That every day he would put four zuzim in some type of tube by his of his door. So he gave tzedakah, and this person didn't know about it. Yom Echad Amar, one day he said, I want to see who's doing me this favor. The poor person said that. How Yom Naga Leila Mar Ukva Lebe Midrasha. That day, Mar Zutra was late leaving the base medrash. Asya Dvisu Bada Bahade, and his wife went with him. Once he saw that Mar Ukva was going towards the door, meaning he wasn't at the door yet, but he saw, let's say Lahavdil, the mailman. There's a big lahavdil between Marokov and the mailman. He saw the person walking by, and once he started going towards the door, he wasn't even at the door yet, but once he started going towards the Marokov went towards the door, Nafak Basrayu, this poor person went out after them, Rahud Mikame, and they ran from him. They didn't want him to see who it was. Aililahu Atuna to have a grufanura. So they went into a certain oven that the coals were already taken out, but it was still very hot. Habakame Kalyan Kare de Mar Ukva. Mar Ukva's feet were getting burned. Amrele Devisu, his wife said, Shakol Karech Osiv Abarai. Take your legs and put them on mine, because her feet were not getting burned in the fire. Cholish Daite. So he was very upset that it seemed that his wife was a bigger tzedekis than he was. And I don't think that he was necessarily upset that she was a bigger tzedekis, but he saw that there was something wrong with what he did, that the heat was hurting him and not harming her. So he didn't understand what he did wrong. So Amrale, so his wife said, I am in the house, and so I can give them benefit more quicker. Meaning you give money, so they have to buy money with the buy food with the money and then cook the food. If someone comes to the house and is hungry, I can give them food right away. So because of that, I have a little bit bigger of schos. So my feet aren't being burned. My kuli high, but why did they go into the oven and risk getting injured and not let the person see who they were? The Amar Marzutra Bar Tuvia Amar Rav, because Marzutra Bar Tuvia said the name of Rav. Amar Le Rav Huna Bar Bizna Amar Rav Shimon Bar Chasida, and some say that it was Rav Huna Bar Bizna in the name of Rav Shimon Chasida. Rami La Amar Rabbi Yochanan Mishum Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, and some say that it was Rabbi Yochanan in the name of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, who his yortzeit allegedly is this Sunday on Lag BaOmer. Noach lo la'adam sheyimsar atzmo l'toch kivshana eish v'yalbin p'nei chaber barabin. It's better that a person put himself into a fiery furnace and not cause someone's face to turn white out of embarrassment publicly. Minalan, how do we know this? Mitamar. From Tamar in Parshas Vayeshev, Diksiv, as it says, Himutzeis. So the drasha is that Yehuda was told that Tamar, who was supposed to be waiting for the Yibum, which Yehuda didn't go through with, became pregnant. So she must have committed adultery to become pregnant. Now, in the laws of the Torah, it wouldn't be a death penalty, but whatever. Because of that, there's a drasha, but because a Yavama Lashuk, someone who needs to, for many reasons, it's not, but it's a little bit shaykh to Shavuos, which is coming up in a few weeks because of the yibum that Ivtzan that Boaz did with Rus. So the Ramban over there by Tamar talks about that, even though the letter of the law is that it's a brother and this and that, but we see from Yehuda, and it's probably based on Kabbalah, this Ramban, that there's a exceptional benefit to doing Yibum, even if it's any relative, not just the brother. And we see because Yehuda ended up doing the Yibum unknowingly with Tamar, and through that, David came out of that, and Boaz was Machlon Echlion didn't have other brothers, but Boaz was a relative, and he did Yibum. So the Ramban in Parshas Vayeshev talks about the importance of Yibum, but also, so she did Yibum already, but she still didn't have. But I guess because I guess actually, if I think about it, she did Yibum, so she's free and clear, right? So I guess the problem was because Yehuda's second son died, Er and Onan died, she had to. So if the one brother did Yibum and they get divorced or whatever, that's fine. Or they did Yibum and then he dies, that's okay. But he didn't have any kids either, it must have been. So now she must have had to do Yibum not from the original marriage, but from the second marriage, from the Yibum marriage. She had to do Yibum for the Yibum. Because just like Er didn't have kids, Onan must not have kids either. So now she had to do Yibum again. Now the halacha is that a Yavam Lashuk, someone who needs to do, a woman who needs to have Yibum or Chalitza, she's not allowed to get married, but it's only a lav. There's no death penalty if she would get married. So if she would get, someone would give her kedushin and she would accept the kedushin, it's usher, but the kedushin take place. She would be married to someone else. So Medine Torah, according to the laws of Torah, what Tamar did was not a death penalty. There's a drasha that says that, or a medrash, that Tamar was the daughter of Malki Tzedek, and Malki Tzedek was a Kohen, as we see by Avram in Parshas Vayera after the war with the kings, that the Malki Tzedek Malch Sholem took out King Lechem v'Yayin v'hu Chohen lekel Elyon, and he was a Kohen to Kel Elyon, and the halacha is at the end of the second to last parak of Shavuos of Sanhedrin, that a Bas Kohen who does nus, which we saw in last week's parsha, in the first aliyah in Parshas Emor, that if a daughter of a Kohen commits adultery, she gets sreifa, she gets the death penalty of sreifa, which is stricter than the regular chenek penalty for adultery. So she got a special misa. But again, it doesn't make sense on several levels, especially because it was before Har Sinai, and there's even if they had a status of Jews, which is a separate machlokas, because there's a famous drush of the Prussia's Drachim, who was related to the Tosos Yantif, an ancestor of Ramosha Soloveitchik on his mother's side, was with the Prussian Drachim, but that was the Tosos Yantif, the Prussian Drachim. I forget who the Prussian Drachim is. It's a famous book of drushes from like 300 years ago. Very interesting drushes, and he says that why were the brothers and Yosef so attacking so why were they so mad at each other by Yosef's dreams and this and that, according to Rashi, I think brings a medrash that Yosef told Yaakov that the brothers were eating Aver min Achai. He said, how is it possible they were eating Aver min Achai? So the Prussian Drachim says is that what happens if you shecht an animal but it's still twitching? A Jew would be allowed to eat that from that animal because it's already considered shechted. For Ben Noach, from the laws of the Ben Noach, that all humanity who are not Jews have 7 mitzvos that they have to keep, their halach of Aver, some of the details of, let's say, murder or theft or adultery or an incest and Aver min Achai are a little bit different for the Bnei Noach than they are for Jews. So the law of Aver min Achai for a non-Jew is that if the animal's still twitching after it kills, you're not allowed to eat it. So the Prussian Drachim says that Yosef held that they were Bnei Noach, and when the animal was still twitching, even though they had already shechted it properly, they weren't allowed to eat it. And they held they had a din of Yisrael. We're the sons of Avram, so we have a din of Yisrael, and we're allowed to eat it when it's twitching. That's what the Prussian Drachim says. It's a famous drush of the Prussian Drachim. So, and so therefore, the brothers didn't eat Aver min Achai. But there's a specific detail in after you shecht it, if it's still twitching, in a Ben Noach, that a Ben Noach is not allowed to eat it. And Yosef, whatever. So that's what the Prussian Drachim says. So Medine Yisrael, as a Jew, what Tamar did wasn't a death penalty. Why Yehuda sentenced her to death and all this stuff, I don't know completely. We went over this Gemara a few years ago in Brachos. But the point of the Gemara is that Yehuda sentenced her to death. And she did not publicly say, I didn't commit adultery. I did Yibum with you. Why didn't she publicly say that to save herself? Because Yehuda would have been embarrassed if that would come out publicly. And there's no Michael Cohen to take care of Stormy Daniels back then. They never heard of such a thing. Lahavdil, Aleph Abdallahs. So instead, she covertly sent the walking stick and the signet ring and said, whoever this is, that's who I'm pregnant from. So then Yehuda, so in order that Yehuda wouldn't be publicly embarrassed, she was willing to get thrown into the fiery furnace and die. So from that we see, and Rabbeinu Yonah in Sharei Tshuva goes into greater detail for that of saying, and he goes to the extreme that no other Rishonim say and says, just like which it's a machlokas Rishonim. There's some Rishonim hold that for the three cardinal sins, but for two of the three, for avodah zarah and for murder, there's a lower level of avodah zarah and murder, but they're still included in that they're still considered a cardinal sin. So let's say, according to some opinions, I think lighting. I think it has to do with getting oil for the lights in a avodah zarah house. So even though that is not a worship for it, but it's called abizrayu avodah zarah. So and I misspoke. So there's according to some Rishonim, not the Rambam, but according to some Rishonim, the Ramban is one of them. There's abizrayu for avodah zarah, like I just mentioned. There's abizrayu for znus. So, for example, there's a Gemara at the end of the 8th parak of Sanhedrin that says a certain person became infatuated with a certain woman, and he wanted to see her without her clothes on, and that the doctor said that was the only cure for him because he got sick over it, and they said no. And the machlokas of the Gemara, was she married or was she single? If she's married, we understand why it's usher, but if she's single, why is it so bad? And so we say that a Bas Yisrael shouldn't be treated like that. It's not proper. It's not respect for her to be treated like that. So they said, the doctor said, well, can't they even talk behind the fence? For him to hear her voice, that would help his health situation significantly. And they said, no, that's usher also. So why is it usher? So according to some Rishonim, it's not actual adultery or anything, because they're just talking, but it's considered an abizrayu, an accessory of znus. The Rabbeinu Yonah goes so far as to say that there's an accessory of avodah zarah, of murder, and that is killing with your mouth by publicly embarrassing someone. About from Tamar, what we're talking about. Exactly right. That's his proof. So meaning for her, it was Yahar Vayavor. It's better for her to be killed than, even though, to save her own life by saying who it is. So that Rabbeinu Yonah goes so far as to say that this is considered an abizrayu of murder. If she would have spoken up, and he would be embarrassed, and his face would have turned white out of shame, it's better that she gets killed, Yaharek, she's been killed, and she doesn't transgress this avera of embarrassing someone publicly. So that's where Rabbeinu Yonah goes so far as to say from this Gemara about Tamar, the incident of Tamar. So basically, why would the person have been so embarrassed to know that he was getting tzedaka from Mar Ukva? I don't know, but it would have been extremely humiliating for some reason. So that's why Mar Ukva and his wife jumped into the furnace. Mar Ukva have ani b'shi buse. Mar Ukva, excuse me, that was Mar Zutra. Excuse me, no. That was Mar Ukva. So now Mar Ukva had another poor person. He would give him 400 zuz every Erev Yom Kippur. Yom Achad Shadrinu Nihale Biyad Beret. 1 year he sent it with his son. Asa Amarle Lotzarach. So Mar Ukva's son came back and said he doesn't need the money. Amar my Chazas. He said, what did you see that you say that he doesn't need the money? Chazar to come is Alfe Le Yain Yashan. I saw that they were sprinkling old wine around the house to make a nice smell in the house. Like some people have potpourri in those days by dripping wine around the house. That was a way of getting a nice smell in the house. And they were so rich, he was saying that they're able to use old wine. They weren't even drinking the wine. They were doing it to have a nice smell in the house. So they're so rich, they don't need this money. Amar Mefane Kuli Hai, Mar Ukva says if he is so used to such extravagance stuff, he meaning I finhu v'shadrinu nehale, so he sent twice as much money that he used to. So this Gemara, I assume, goes with the Gemara we saw before that we saw last week, I think it was, that if a person was raised to have expensive tastes, if he becomes poor, there's a mitzvah to give him tzedaka according to what he was used to. But then the Gemara mentioned people who were not accustomed to it, but then they spoiled themselves on fancy stuff, then you don't have to give them fancy stuff. So it seems that Mar Ukva understood that this person had been wealthy and was used to these expensive tastes. So therefore, there's a mitzvah of tzedakah to give him more money to continue to support himself with to that extent. Kinach nafshe, when Mar Ukva was dying, Amar Aituli Chushbanai did tzedakah. He said, "Bring me my ledger books of my tzedakah." Ashka tahavik sibe shivas alfei dinrei sianke. It said that there were 7,000 sianke dinarim. Sianke was the name of a place, and Amar zavadai kalili v'orcha rechikna. The way is very long, and I have very little to take with. Kam bezabde lepalge mamona. And then and then he gave half of his money away to tzedakah. So even though the Rishonim say that this was a tremendous amount of tzedakah that he gave, he said, I didn't give enough, I need to give more tzedakah. So he gave up to half. So even though we mentioned a couple weeks ago that there's a machlokus between the Rambam in Pirush Mishnah and Peah, and everyone normally knows the opinion of the Rabbeinu Yerucham, are you supposed to give 10% or 20% to tzedakah if you're about to die and you're splitting up your assets? It's not a problem to give half of it to tzedakah. So it's clear that tzedakah was very important to Mar Ukva. So then the Gemara says, how did he give so much money to tzedakah? Amar Rabbi Eloi. Rabbi Eloi says, and I think we saw this before. Yeah, we said on Daf Nun. Ba'usha hiskinu hamavazvaz al yivazvaz yosem chomesh. In Usha, that was one of the places the Sanhedrin went after it left the Lishkas Hagazdis, that when you give tzedakah, you can't give more than a fifth to tzedakah. So how did he give so much? So the Gemara says, Hanimi lechayim. So what I said, it was the lines of the Gemara. I forgot the Gemara said it right here. That's when you're alive. Shema yered min chasav, lest you get poor by giving too much tzedakah. Valachar misa, but if it's tzedakah for after you're not around anymore, leislan, but it's not a problem to give more than a fifth. Rabbi Abba Havitzayer Zuze Besudra. Rabbi Abba used to attach coins in his. He wore some type of turban or something that had not. It was this material was tied up, and in the knot of it or whatever, he would put money. V'shadi leilachore. He would put it behind his back. Umamti nafshi levei anye, and he would make himself be found near the houses of poor people, and they would know that there was money back there, and they would take it, but from behind him, so he didn't see them. It seems, it seems that they knew who he was, but he didn't know who was taken from him. Umatzle eine miramai, but he would somehow point his eyes backwards to make sure that cheaters wouldn't take. That it was only the aniyan. But he did in a way where people who weren't poor wouldn't take the risk getting his eye looking at them. But it was available for poor people, and he didn't know who was taking. Rabbi Chanina havu anya. Rabbi Chanina had a certain poor person. Used to send him 4 zuzi every Erev Shabbos, every Friday. Yoma chad shadrinu nihele biyad. One day, Rabbi Chanina couldn't bring it himself, so he had his wife send it. It's similar to the story we had of Mar Ukva sending the 400 zuz before Yom Kippur to the person's house. So he had his wife take this one. He had his wife take it. Asay Amri lo tzarach. She came back and said he doesn't need the money. My chazis. So he said, what did you see that he doesn't need the money? Shamid havikamri le. I heard that they were saying to him, what do you want to eat? As we turn to Samachas Amud Aleph, b'talei kasef or b'talei zav. Do you want to use a silver tablecloth or a gold tablecloth? So Rashi says it doesn't literally mean gold, silver cloth, gold or silver tablecloths, but it means there was white linen or silk that was red. Whatever. So there's some discussion over here. I think in Tosfos about what color was standard gold. So we know that there's regular gold. We call it yellow gold, and if you add some alloys, it becomes white gold, which is more similar in color to what's it called, platinum, but it's much cheaper because it's much less dense than platinum, and platinum is more expensive to begin with. And then I guess you could put some other stuff in it, and it turns more of a red. So it seems that the reason that they called it that the gold was called that the red silk was called gold is because a lot of the gold that they had the reddish tinge. How important is that for us to know? I don't know, but that's what some Rishonim seem to indicate from this Gemara. So they're saying, do you want to use the good linen tablecloth or the good silk tablecloth? Obviously, a good linen tablecloth is expensive. Domain, but the silk is super expensive. So Amar. So he said Hainu Dam Rebbe Lazar. This is what Rebbe Lazar said. Bo v'nachzik tovel ramayim. We have to be thankful to the cheaters. If it wouldn't be for them, we'd be sinning every day. Shenamber, the pasuk says, so the pasuk says, and this is also about not giving tzedakah, about not loaning money before Shemitah, because the loan's going to get canceled. That because you don't want Shemitah to cancel out the loan, so you're not lending money, the poor person will cry out to Hashem, and there'll be a sin in you by not being generous enough to lend the money, even though there's a small risk that you're not going to get paid back. B'tani Reb Chia Barami Difti, and on that pasuk, Reb Chia Barami Difti said, and I guess Rebbe Lazar quoted this. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha Omer. Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha says, "Kol hamalim einov min hatzedakah." Whoever moves his eyes away from tzedakah, meaning he's hiding himself. He pretends that he's the person. He doesn't see someone who needs tzedakah. Ki'ilu oved avodas kachavim. It's as if he worshipped avodah zarah. Ksiv hacha, because it says here, "Hishamar lecha peni hadavarim lucha b'liyal." Be careful lest you see in your heart a wicked thought, b'liyal. Uksiv hasam, and it says by someone who's trying to missionize people to worship avodah zarah, yatzu anashim b'nei b'liyal. Wicked people went out to try to convince people to worship avodah zarah. So the word b'liyal, malahal and avodas kachavim, just like they're trying to missionize people for avodah zarah, avkan avodas kachavim. So to here, when it's talking about that you're not lending money to poor people, it's like a sin of avodah zarah. So basically, in this Gemara, he came to a different conclusion than Mar Ukva did. Mar Ukva said, "Oh, the person must have been more wealthy than I thought before he lost his money. I have to give him more money to keep that lifestyle." And Reb Chanina said, "Oh, I don't have to give him at all. To the fact that he made out that he needed tzedakah was a facade, and I don't have to give him any tzedakah." So the Gemara asks, Tosfos asks, I think it's Tosfos. Yeah. So Tosfos says, why didn't he come to the same conclusion? He wasn't rich. So he says this tablecloth or that tablecloth is something that doesn't matter. Even someone who's super rich and who's born with a super silver spoon in their mouth, it doesn't matter which one of these tablecloths you eat on. To have the house a certain smell, that's something which you could be accustomed to with that they would spill the wine to make it smell good. That's something that's a legitimate need. Obviously most people don't have that legitimate need for it, that nose and taste for it, but to have these fancy super fancy tablecloths is not even needed for people who are raised a certain way. So that's why Rabbi Chanina here did not say, "Oh, I have to give him more tzedakah." Instead, I don't have to give him at all, but we have to be appreciative for the swindlers who make who pretend I need tzedakah, this is happening, and you give them tzedakah, because if you would pretend, someone would say, I need tzedakah, you say, I don't have any money on me, I can't give you. And really the person needs, it's a big avera. That's what the drasha is. We learn from the word b'nei Belial that it's so that you're very wicked, that if you don't give someone tzedakah who needs tzedakah, to be avodah zarah, so we're extra meticulous to give tzedakah even to the swindlers, and because we even give to them, it saves us from having the status of being b'nei Belial, according to this drasha that he quoted from Rabbi Lazar. That's what the Gemara is saying over here. Is that clear? Okay, so one thing you need to say is that the Rambam lists is why was it important that Mar Ukva, he didn't want the person to know who was giving him tzedakah, and why did on the previous Amud, Rabbi Abba, why did he keep the money behind him so that he wouldn't see who is giving the tzedakah? So the Rambam talks about the 7 levels of tzedakah. Parak 10, law 7. There's 8 levels in tzedakah, each one higher than the other. The highest one that there's no level higher is someone who that gives someone, a fellow Jew, a gift or a loan, or makes him a partnership or finds him a job so that he could support himself, that he doesn't need to collect tzedakah from anyone else. That's the highest level of tzedakah. The 7th level is someone who gives tzedakah for a poor person, and you don't know who you're giving to, and the recipient doesn't know where it's coming, because that's a mitzvah lishma. That's a mitzvah lishma. And close to this is someone who gives to the tzedakah collection, because you don't know exactly who it's going to go to, and the person doesn't know exactly who it's coming from. The 6th level is the giver knows who he's giving to, but the poor person doesn't know who he's receiving it from. So that's Mar Ukva. And the level underneath that is if the poor person knows who's he getting it for, but the giver doesn't know who he's giving it to. So if a giver gives it to so that would be like, so that's the Rambam mentions this case of Rabbi Abba. It's like the Gdolei Chachamim who would put the coins in their fabrics, and they put it behind them, and the poor people came so that they wouldn't be embarrassed. So these are levels, but this level of Rabbi Abba was a little bit less, according to the Rambam, than the level of Mar Ukva. The level underneath that is you give someone before he asks. The level underneath that is if someone asks and you give him tzedakah. The level underneath there is you don't give him everything you need, but you're very nice and pleasant and polite to him. And the level underneath that is if you give, but you're showing that you're not so happy and willing to give. So and then the Rambam says that it's that the Gedolei Chachamim would give a small coin to a poor person before davening, because of a pasuk, ani b'tzedek achzeh panecha, through tzedek, which the drasha is through tzedakah, I will see your face, and tzedakah is coming in front of the Rabbanu Shalom, so they gave tzedakah first. So according to some say, according to the Rambam, I believe, I think some say according to the Rambam, that if you don't have any money, but you're nice, and you say to the poor person, I wish I give you, I don't have anything right now, but I'll think of you, or you direct them, even though you don't give him anything. That's better than giving him money, but making it look like it's a bother. But the Rambam doesn't specifically say that, but I think some people try to say that in the Rambam. Okay, back to the Gemara. Tanar Rabbanan, we learned in the Brisa, Hamasames Eino, if you make your eye blind to someone who needs tzedakah, but mitzvah is bitno, and you expand your stomach, shoko, or he makes his leg as if he's disabled, that if he's crippled, Eino nifter, meaning when instead of giving tzedakah, you do something, the fact that you can't go and give the tzedakah. Eino nifter min olam ha'tshuvah dekach. You're not going to leave the world until this thing actually happens. If you pretended that you couldn't move with your leg was no good, you'll have a leg problem, etc. When someone who receives tzedakah and doesn't really need tzedakah, he's not going to leave the world until he really needed tzedakah. Tanan Hasan, we learned in a mishna. In Peah, when we learn about when the Mishnah talks about levels of tzedakah. So what if a person's coming on hard times? We don't require someone to sell his house or the utensils that he uses in his house in order that he should avoid needing to take tzedakah. No, you let him live in his house. You let him keep his tools or his dishes. You don't make him sell that stuff. But you could give him tzedakah and not having to sell that stuff. You don't say you have to sell this stuff before taking tzedakah. There are a couple organizations, it's still a minority, but part of their tzedakah thing is they teach budgeting to the people. Now, if you teach budgeting because you don't want them to bother you anymore, so that's not such a high level of tzedakah. But if you teach them budgeting because they mamish don't know, and they waste money on stuff because they don't realize they don't have skills, it could, I'm not positive about this, but it could come under the highest level that the Rambam says. You give someone a job or make them a partnership or find them a profession. If by teaching them the skill, they're able to be self-sufficient, that's a high level. It's done in a respectful way. We're not telling you have to do it, but we want to give you these skills so that you won't need tzedakah, because it's better to teach the person to fish than to give them the fish every day, right? So I've heard of a couple organizations that do it. I don't know how widespread it is. Maybe it's gotten more widespread in the last 10 years, but if it's done right with the right intentions, it's a good thing. And it is something that a lot of people aren't taught. And if they know how to think, this is what I need, this is what I want, you need to put your money for your needs, not for your wants. And if you know how to budget it, and they could support themselves and not need to ask money, and it's done in a respectful way. It could be it could be similar to the top level of tzedakah according to the Rambam. Velo, we don't require the person to sell his house or some of his utensils, but we learned in the Brisa, if he was used to using gold, he should use silver instead. So he should sell the gold and use cheaper stuff. If he was used to silver stuff, he should use copper stuff. That's cheaper. So Rav Zvid lo kasha. Rav Zvid says it's not a contradiction. When we say that you have to sell these things and use a cheaper one, that if it's a bed or a table. But where we say you don't require him to sell it, that's with his cups and his plates. So the stuff that you're like using very close to your body during the meal, that you could keep what you had. But the table and your chair, that's not as important to have the super fancy thing, so that you have to sell before we give you tzedakah. Mishna kosus sukaros delo, but why don't we require him to sell expensive goblets or cups or plates? Because he could say these cheaper ones are revolting to me. But can he say that the bed or the table? I said chair before, but it's mita. a bed, so they didn't just sleep on it. They probably ate on it also in those days, especially if they had the sudas where they lay down like a Pesach night that we do haseba. Mito shulchanami. Why doesn't he say that? Amar lo mikabli alava. He says, I'm not used to that. It's not so good for me. So that is a good enough thing. Maybe there is something different that the cheaper, better table isn't so comfortable for him. So Amarava Breda Rabba. So Rabba is the name of Rabba b'machresha de kaspa. You have to sell it if you have a silver plow. Why do you need a silver plow? There's no reason to need a silver plow. So if you have a silver plow, you won the Northern 40 competition. So they gave you a silver plow as the prize. Sell the silver plow. You don't need a silver plow. Rapapa gave a different but stuff that is not so clearly a needless luxury, we don't make you sell before you give tzedakah. Rapapa gave a different answer. Lokasha kan kodem shlo lidei giboy kan laachar sheyavu lidei giboy. The difference is where. So the halacha is that if someone had less than 200 zuz, which was the amount that you needed to buy a certain size land, so you could support yourself. If you make less than that, you can collect the leket shechacha and peah, the gifts from the field that we learned about in a couple weeks ago in the parsha, and it comes up in Megillus Rus. So when we don't require you to sell this up before tzedakah is if your net worth was less than 200 zuz, but with the stuff that you collected from the field, now you hit 200 zuz. Or you didn't have 200 zuz, and if you would have sold these things, you would have 200 zuz. For that, we don't require you to sell. However, if the person really had enough money that he had more than 200 zuz, and he took these like a shechach and peah also, and then the Beis Din find out that he was not so poor that he should have taken, then Beis Din collects from what he took, because he stole from real poor people. So in that case, if he doesn't have cash to give them, then Beis Din would sell his plates and his cups to pay back the real poor people who weren't able to get the leket shechan peah because he took it first. A Mishnah. So an orphan, meaning her father died, and her mother or brothers married her off, and she agreed to it. So I would say that this. So we see the Gemara is going to say that this is that she's a katana. She's not bas mitzvah yet. But they said, we want to marry you to Shmuel Barrel, and she says, okay, Shmuel Barrel is okay. Because of zuz, and they gave her a dowry of 100 or 50. 50 we saw before is the minimum. Once she reaches adulthood, she can collect from her brother and mother that which she should have gotten for her dowry, if her father would have been alive. Rabbi Huda Miriam, he says Abbas Rishona Yinasan Lishnia Kedech Yinasan Rishona. If the father was still alive when the first daughter got married, you have to give to the second one the same amount that he gave to the first one. But Chachamim say Pa'amim Shadar Ani Vehishiro Esher V'Hani Alashaminat Anachasim V'Nosinla. Sometimes someone is poor and got rich, or is rich and got poor. So just because he did that for the first daughter, maybe he wasn't in the same financial situation to do that for the second daughter. So just because we know what he gave the first time, we don't necessarily give the same amount for the second daughter. Rather, Shamanis and Chasav Nosin-in-law, we have to evaluate his property and give her based on what he has. And the Gemara is going to say what this means. Gemara, Amar Shmuel, the Parnasa Shaman Ba'av. For Parnasa, we evaluate the holdings, the estate, the value of the estate of the father. So we don't know exactly what we mean right now. So right now we're assuming that parnasa here means how much to give her as a dowry, which is what our mission was talking about. So to Gemara just quoted Shmuel that say the parnasa we evaluate based on what the father. So Rashi says that when this girl whose father died comes to get married, we give her based on people who knew her father, if he was generous or stingy, and they give her a dowry based on what people who knew her father say was his disposition. Mesave. So they asked against because Shmuel was an Amora. So they're going to find a brisa that Shmuel doesn't accord with any opinion in the brisa. Habanos nizonos umisparnesos mnichse avihim. The girls get fed and misparnes and supported from the property of their father. Ketzad. So what's an example? Ein omrim ilu aviyakayim kapu kafei. Wouldn't say if the father was alive, he'd give her so much, such and such amount. Rather, we see how much his estate is, and we give her based on how much is in his estate. So my love parnasa sabal. So when it says that she gets fed nizonos and gets parnasa, doesn't this mean parnasa that is going to be given to her husband as a dowry? So because Shmuel says we estimate based on what the father's disposition was. This brisa says no, you doesn't matter what the father's disposition was. It depends what's in the estate. So Shmuel said not with the brisa, but the question of the brisa is only a question if we assume that the parnasa that we're talking about is a dowry, the parnasa that goes to the husband when she gets married. So Amrav Nachum Bar Yitzchak lo, but parnasa atzma. No, that means the parnasa for herself before she gets married, because besides for food, she needs to have clothes, to be dressed presentably. She won't get a good shidduch if she's wearing rags, etc., etc. So the Gemara says, "Hanizonos umis parnasos katani," but the brisa mentioned food and parnasa. My love achas parnasas abal, achas parnasas atzma. So let one of them be talking about the dowry, and one of them talking about for herself. So the Gemara says, "Lo, idi parnasas atzma." Both of them are talking about what she gets for herself, not when she gets married. V'lo kasha, and it's not difficult that the brisa uses two different terms. Because nizunis literally means food and drink. It's from mazon. Hazan es hakol, as we say in benching, and the parnasa means belvusha b'chisuye, her clothing and covering that she needs. Tanan. So now we're asking Shmuel from our mishna. Sometimes a person was rich and he loses money, or he was poor, he gets rich. I said that backwards. Rather, we have to see how much money his estate has, and we give her based on that. My ani umay asher. So what does it mean poor, and what does it mean rich? If we mean that poor means he has very few possessions, asher ben chasim, and rich means he has a lot of possessions. That means that the first Tana, which is Rabbi Yehuda, who says that if he had a previous daughter who he married off, we give the second the same dowry he gave to the first. How could Rabbi Yehuda argue on the logic of the Chachamim? It's true, maybe he gave her $10,000 dowry because he was rich back then, but maybe he had business reversals, and now he could only afford $2,000. Rabbi Yehuda would agree that that's reasonable. But that would imply that Rabbi Yehuda holds, even if he was rich, but he got poor, he still has to give the same dowry that he gave to his first daughter. But he doesn't have enough money. There's no way that he could possibly give this. There's no way that Rabbi Yehuda would hold that he has to give something that's impossible. Ani bedas, asher bedas. So it must mean when we say ani, it means he's poor in his outlook. He's not willing to, he's stingy. He's not willing to give out to others, even as a dowry for his daughter. And asher bedas. And if he's rich in that he's generous. The Katani, but the Mishnah says, That the Chachamim's opinion is we have to see how much property he has in his estate and give her based on that. So that means that according to the Chachamim, it doesn't matter what we think. If that's what it means, then the Chachamim say it doesn't matter what the person's disposition was. Even if he's a generous guy, if he had a small estate, we're not going to give her a lot of money. Utiyufta de Shmuel, and that would disprove Shmuel, who says that we asked people who knew him well to see what he would give. So the Gemara says, no, that's not a kasha. Hudamar Rabbi Yehuda. Shmuel could hold like Rabbi Yehuda. It's true that you're asking that Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is inconsistent with the Chachamim. Fine, but the Rabbi Yehuda, the Chachamim, Shmuel like Rabbi Yehuda. That's not a problem. The Tanan, because Rabbi Yehuda said in our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda Omer im heitzi bas rishona yinosin l'shniya kederach shenosin l'rishona. So Shmuel means you ask people who know him, and they say because he gave such and such to his first daughter, and nothing significantly changed since that time, you should give her the same amount that her older sister got. So if that's so, v'nei malachik Rabbi Yehuda. So why does Shmuel say it that way? Why doesn't he just say I possibly Rabbi Yehuda? It's a simpler thing to just be direct. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda have amina dafka shitzia de gali daite. I would only say that Rabbi Yehuda, that's only true if there was an older sister who got married first, so we know exactly how much he gave her. Have a low, you see a low. But if he never married off any daughters before, maybe this is his first daughter, maybe the older ones are sons, then we wouldn't be allowed to do this. Kamash Malan, so Shmuel is teaching us, time at Rabbi Yehuda does lina and basar umdana. Rabbi Yehuda's reason is that we follow our evaluation. We evaluate that he was a generous guy and he had this much money to send. He would have given a dowry of this much. Loshna Isia of Loshna Loisia. And it doesn't matter if he previously married off a daughter or not. The high diktani Hisia. And the reason that so then how come Rabbi Yehuda only holds of the case? Why doesn't Rabbi Yehuda say it the same way that Shmuel says? That we follow umdana, our evaluations of people who knew him well. Why does Shmuel limit that and only say we only go that far if he already gave that to one of his older daughters or a previous daughter? To show you the power of the Rabbanan, to show that even when we have not just umdana, even when we have justifiable, we have the receipts, we can say exactly how much in the Tanaim and in the Kesuva, well, not the Tanaim, but in the Kesuva, how much he gave, the Chachamim still disregard it. They say, Ani v'hisher v'hani. Amarle Rav Chisda, Amarle Rav Chisda, Rav said to Rav Chisda, Darshin and Mishmach halachik Rabbi Yehuda. Can I publicly say that you pass me like Rabbi Yehuda? Amarle Yehei Rava ki kalhani mili meliyasu tijujmei. It should be the will of the Rebbeinu Shalom that every good thing I say like that, you say in my name. So he said, yes, I pass like Rabbi Yehuda. You could say it in my name. Kain Yerbu, you should publicly say how I give such great psakim all the time. Umiyama Rava Hachi, but did Rava really hold this way that he passes like Rabbi Yehuda, that we could follow this umdana? Vatanya, we learned in the Brayso, Rabbi Omer Basan Izonos Mina Achin, a daughter who's being supported by the brothers, meaning the father died. So the brothers who are in charge of the estate right now have to support their sister. That's what Takana we learned about in 2 prakim ago. No, tell us Isra Nechasim. She takes 10% of the estate for her dowry. Amarava Hechos Rebbe. And Rabbi says we pass it like Rebbe. So there he doesn't say we follow the Rabbi Yehuda's opinion of the umdana or of a previous daughter who got married off. Lo kasha, the Gemara says it's not a question. Hada amide, hadlo amide. When it gives the blanket statement of 10%, that's because we don't know what he would have held. If we know that he would have given more, we give more. If you remember back then, we learned a Gemara where someone was in town and he asked a certain Amora to go with him when he was before the dowry. And he said, I don't want to go. He says, no, I want you to come. And the guy wrote every penny that he had for the dowry. Remember that Gemara? So it's possible that if we have people who know him, they would say he would give a tremendous percentage of his. But if we don't know him, Rava agrees, if we don't know him, it's a flat 10%. Hachinami mistavra, and this makes sense. The Amar Rav Adabar Ava, because Rav Adabar says, Maisa, there was an incident, Venosala Rebbe, Echad Mishnei Masar Ben Achasim. Rebbe gave her 1/12 of the estate. Kashna Adadi. It's a contradiction. How could Rabbi in one case say 10%? Other case, excuse me, 1 out of 10 is 10%. Another case, he said 1 out of 12, which is what, 8.5%. So Rebbe himself was inconsistent with the amount he gave her. The Elalab Shmamina, Hadamide, Hadlamidne, Shmamina, because it meant the case where Rebbe gave her 10%, that's because he didn't know. The case where he gave her 8.5%, that's because we knew him and we knew that he wasn't going to give 10%, but we knew that he would give 8.5%. So that's within Rebbe's opinion himself. So otherwise, Rebbe's opinion himself would have been a contradiction. So this must be the resolution. When we know how much he gives, we give based on what we know, whether it's less than 10%, whether it's more than 10%. And if we don't know, there could be a default of 10%. We'll leave it here.